So the topic of the next lesson is on fitting in, school philosophy, and culture. So there's really a few big ideas here. One is the idea of school culture. What is it? And a school's philosophy, you could say, is part of its culture. And the other big idea is fitting in. This is a process that we call socialization. So, in fact, whenever we join a new organization, we are gradually socialized into it. We start to adapt the norms and the values of the culture, the school culture or the organizational culture that we're working in. If we don't start to adapt those values, we'll have some tension and we won't fit in very well. So, culture and this notion of fitting in go hand in hand. And the sooner we can understand a school's culture, the easier it is for us to, well, either choose to fit into it or decide the school isn't really something we want to fit into. Now, this ties in with your teacher competency frameworks. So you notice there is a dimension called school vision, mission, culture, and ethos. Now you can download and read this for yourselves, but you'll notice in the left column, it deals with this issue of adaptation to the school, right? And to its culture, essentially. So it breaks it down: school vision, mission, culture, ethos. Ethos, its values, its way of acting, way of condoned behaviors, this kind of thing. Um, Actualization of schools' beliefs, mission, and values and mission. So the idea that as professional teachers, part of our responsibility is to put the school's culture into practice. Cultivation of a caring and inviting school culture. Now, I think this presumes that there are other sorts of cultures that may not be caring and inviting. Okay? And contribution to renewing the school mission and vision. So that implies that it's something that needs renewing, right? It can get static and stale if it is not renewed. Okay? As well as promoting the school culture and school image. So if you read across from the threshold level to the accomplished level, you'll get more of an idea of how we as teachers could be developed and develop ourselves in this dimension or this domain. Now, of course, keep in mind, this comes from the government. Do we necessarily agree with it or not? Could there be negatives to this? That's something you could ask yourself. Now, also keep in mind you have your philos from your field experience intended learning outcomes, and there's a couple that relate right to this notion of school culture. So one is, by going through your field experience, you should demonstrate an understanding of the school as a social and cultural institution. And another is develop and demonstrate an understanding of essentially the school's cultures and how they impact on practices and teachers' responsibilities. So it's important for you to get a sense of what school culture is and how you might fit into it and what challenges you might face in fitting into it. So that's what this lesson is really going to be about. So to prepare for this, there's a couple things that I'm going to ask you to do. Nothing too tricky. One is to think a little bit about what is school culture. What are the ingredients of school culture? So if you think of culture as something that is made up of a whole bunch of other things, what would they be? And what would it be for a school? Now, I don't want to tell you too much because I think if you think about culture for yourselves and then think about how you could use the metaphor of, say, a culture like Chinese culture or Australian culture How could you use that as a metaphor for a school? I think you can probably come up with some ideas. So this is what your task is really to come up with ideas. So here's a hint. Cultures are often thought of as superficial things most immediately, right? We think about clothing, food, art, customs, holidays, these sorts of things. Schools will often have a culture day where people dress up in certain fashions, right? But that's not real culture. Real culture are things that lie below the surface. They're the things that, that we don't really necessarily need to talk about openly with people who share our culture. Everyone just understands what it is. Okay? It's the basic assumptions and values and beliefs. Now, there are things that we see in society that have that make these things more explicit, right? So, for instance, there are certain ideas of space, how close you can stand to someone else, for instance. Um, what do you do with time, right? Is it important to be punctual or not? You can see these sorts of things around you, and they tell you something about beliefs and values, right? So here's the task for you for next week. I'd like you to spend some time thinking about culture. If you want to get a bit of a stronger hint, you can dip into some of the uh, recommended readings that talk about culture. But can you just walk around with your phone or something like that, or your some other mobile device, and take a few photos of things that you think tell us about Hong Kong IED culture? What are the things that you see that tell us about the values and beliefs and important things that you would associate with the culture of Hong Kong IED? Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, but if you can get access to a school or even another organization that you know of and that you frequent, that you go to, maybe you can take photos there. And so, what I would like you to do, though, is print out. It doesn't have to be color; black and white's okay. Just 5 or 6 images of Hong Kong IED culture, and bring that to class next week. And what we'll do is we'll work in groups to look at our images of culture and see if we can make sense of what Hong Kong IED culture is like, and then start to think about school cultures. Now, just as there are different societal cultures, there's Chinese culture and maybe Canadian culture and English culture and Argentinian culture, there is also different school cultures. And some researchers have labeled these. And so we'll look at those labels that some people have come up with to describe different sorts of school cultures. Then the second thing is this idea of socialization. So again, this is really that notion of fitting in. And so what I'd like you to do is take a look at the reading by Galt. It's the required reading for the course. There's 3 questions in your syllabus that really are trying to get you to think about this notion of fitting into a school culture. So you don't need to read the whole chapter super carefully, but skim it. Look for the place where you can find the answers to these 3 questions, and jot down a few sentences for each question. That should be sufficient. The first question asks you to put some things in point form on a table, and the other 2 are just a couple sentences each to answer should be fine. That will help you set up another task that we will do in class, which will involve thinking about fitting into cultures. Um, that should be a little bit of fun if you want to, going around taking photos of things. It's about 10 minutes for me talking now. Give yourself probably half an hour walking around taking photos, maybe another 20 minutes to skim and answer these questions. Don't forget to print out the photos to bring to class next week and to put your answers to the questions on the discussion board. And that's it for me. Take care. Have fun.